Alrighty, hello everybody. So today just looking to do a quick overview on lesson 1 in our new digital notebook on sectionalism and the Civil War. So this first lesson is about the expansion of slavery in the United States as we are expanding westward and looking at the compromises that were made between the North and the South and how it shows the sectional divide that is existing and is continuing to grow in the country. So to preview the maps that you could see kind of in the top right-hand corner of the lesson opener, we have the Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1850, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act. These are three of the compromises that we will take a closer look at in this lesson, but just a little overview, and I think the maps are very helpful to get that visual. The orange is where slavery is prohibited, meaning not allowed. The green is where slavery is permitted, which means it is allowed. And the yellow is decisions left to the territories. So these are territories, not states yet. So the decision is still up in the air. So Missouri Compromise 1820 declared that Maine was a free state and Missouri was a slave state, and the compromise did not allow new slave states north of the Missouri southern border. So that's that 3630 line that we'll get into in just a moment. The Compromise of 1850 allowed for California to be a free state in exchange for the Fugitive Slave Act to be much stricter. Another point that we'll talk about briefly here in this review video. And then the Kansas-Nebraska Act 1854 ignored the Missouri Compromise and allowed slavery north of Missouri's southern border, and that creates a new problem. So again, we'll take a closer look at each of these, but these maps are just helpful to get that nice visual. One thing to mention as we're talking about this sectionalist divide, the expansion of slavery, is those that acted out against the expansion of this system and the existence of this system. So we talked about abolitionists in our last digital notebook. One of those abolitionists was Harriet Tubman, who was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. So remember, this was not an actual railroad, but a network of people throughout the South and throughout the North, both African American and white, offering shelter, aid to those trying to escape slavery in the South. There were several different ways in which this was done. Levy Coffin's house is the video right down here, where there was a trap door where people could hide, up to 15 people could hide inside of his house. There was also secret codes like in quilts, where you could just have a quilt draped over your front porch, and the different patterns that were woven into the quilts had different meanings and different significance. So whether that was you're going in the right direction, you can stop at my house for shelter, you can knock on the door and I can tell you where to go. So this system is existing to resist enslavement in the South. Now, the South is aware of this system, and that is why they pushed for the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850 as part of the Compromise of 1850. This act requires that enslaved people be returned to their owners, even if they were in a free state. The act also made the federal government responsible for finding and returning any and trying any escaped slaves and the escaped enslaved people, and it could arrest and fine and put in jail any white allies who were assisting an escaped enslaved person. So what this was trying to do was to prevent the runaway to freedom. And what that did is it made the North create laws that didn't really apply and can coincide with the Fugitive Slave Act, kind of ignoring it. The federal government didn't really support this act, didn't enforce it, and it made the South double down. And the South passed state laws that mirrored the Fugitive Slave Act because they were angry that in the North it wasn't being taken seriously and it wasn't being applied when it was a compromise in the Compromise of 1850. Another piece here to add to the puzzle is the Dred Scott decision. The Dred Scott decision is one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in Supreme Court history, where we have the decision made based off of Dred Scott's suing his master, saying that he was brought to a free state and therefore was entitled to his freedom. And the Supreme Court ruled against him, saying that an enslaved person could never be a citizen, could never have their freedom. Therefore, the case does not even apply, does not even get to be heard because he's not a citizen of the country. And the Chief Justice at the time, Justice Taney, was a Southerner who believed that this would solve the issue of sectionalism in the country. This would solve the issue of slavery in the country and make it so that it will always exist no matter what. And this is 1857. So we're really approaching that Civil War beginning in 1861 and the election of 1860. So this is right on the cusp of that. So this is going to be a major schism in the country that's going to divide a lot of people. Now, you took a look at the individual compromises here. I want to show our finished slide just as a reminder. So the Missouri Compromise, balance between the free and slave states was the main concern. Missouri is going to be admitted as a slave state to keep the balance. Maine will be admitted as a free state. And it outlawed slavery everywhere in the remaining Louisiana Purchase that was north of that 3630 line. So again, when we look at that map, right here is the 3630 line. Anything north, a new territory would not have slavery. The Compromise of 1850, again, greatly increases sectionalism. The Fugitive Slave Act is passed. The South passes their own state laws, and California is admitted as a free state. The Kansas-Nebraska Act, this repeals the Missouri Compromise, creates 2 new territories, and allows for popular sovereignty. So popular sovereignty meaning that the population of that territory can decide whether that territory will be a slave state or a free state. This led to an increase in violence between pro-slavery and anti-slavery activists who flooded the new territory to try and vote one way or the other. So this led to the Kansas-Nebraska Act being called Bleeding Kansas, and we had another one of our abolitionists, John Brown, who was an anti-slavery abolitionist, and we see him acting out in Kansas at this time. And then we have the 3/5 compromise added into the mix here, just as a reminder that the system of slavery was written into the Constitution. And it was written specifically to increase the power of the southern states. So the southern states wanted their population to be counted, including those that were enslaved, but they did not want those that were enslaved to be considered citizens or have rights. They were enslaving these people. So the Southerner states agree to count each person as 3/5 of a person. So this gives them a third more seats in Congress, a third more electoral votes than if that portion of the population had been ignored. At the beginning of the Civil War, the population in the South is about 9 million people. 4 million of those are enslaved. So we're looking at the difference between population count. Meanwhile, the North had a population of over 30 million, about 33 million at the time. So 3/5 compromise is just another piece of the puzzle to kind of remind ourselves that this system was written into the Constitution, and these compromises had been existing for quite some time. So we're seeing here the sectional divide, the tensions increasing, and we will see shortly the election of 1860 is that tipping point. So I hope this little review helped.